and start recording so I don't forget. But
Great.
we all read your book as our book of the month this month. And so I was so excited that it was just timed out perfectly that you launched and we could have this as our first book of the
I
year.
know, it's so exciting.
So
And I
perfect.
love, like I said, I love your company, and Brooke, you're also, you're not just a client, you're you're not just the president, you're a client, or whatever that hair club for men president ad like that. But you're a proponent of unicorn space before the book came out. So thank you for that.
I definitely was. And I feel like it definitely saved me and probably my marriage too during the pandemic and starting a company. So I'm always a huge proponent of everything that you do. And I always have this as I pulled it down, the fair play deck. But I always have it in my office because I cannot tell you how many people I talk to that it comes up constantly. And I'm like, have you heard of fair play? Like,
Right.
I gave my sister the deck when she moved in with her boyfriend because I was like, you need this now. Like, I don't care.
Yes.
You have kids, you need it now. So thank
Well, it's
you.
all connected, and thank you. So thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, we already have another podcast episode, and all of our people here at Allaby have heard me talk about fair play probably to exhaustion over here. I'm always bringing it up. But I definitely want to spend all of our time today on unicorn space. But I thought what you could do is just share with us briefly kind of your work prior to this. So everything with fair play, but really just kind of hitting on giving us a tiny bit of context of why are we still here with this? Like
Right.
fair play, why are we still here? And just kind of share a little bit on that first.
Well, I was thinking this morning about this because I was being interviewed for a colleague of mine. She's doing a book around rest. And I was telling her I have a very different view of rest. And I think what fair play and unicorn has shown me in terms of like the antidotes to burnout, right? It's not a walk around the block anymore. It's not having drinks with a friend. It's really being interested in your own life. That's really the only antidote to burnout long term. And to be interested in your own life, you have to make your own decisions.
Yeah.
And that agency is really I'd say the tying thread between fair play and unicorn space. So even last week I was thinking, I hadn't turned my notifications off somehow, and I'm getting these like bings. I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, is there like a fire at the school or whatever? But I had been on 6 different text chains in the past. It was so lovely. People were sending me in these text chains this link to free COVID testing when it came out. Don't forget to order this. And so instead of just clicking on and starting to order the free COVID test, I responded to each of these 6 text chains and said, are men receiving these texts? Are men receiving these texts? Are men receiving these texts? And then all the text chains started blowing up with, well, you got us again. We just started mindlessly making that decision to order these tests. And so why that doesn't matter in a one-off, but why we're a cumulative life of how we make our decisions is that, say you had 30 minutes for uninterrupted work on your business, on your unicorn space, on a painting, and that text comes in. Do you say, I'm going to make the decision to do this later, even though people are creating all urgency around it? Am I going to make the decision to say, oh, my partner has the medical and healthy living card, so I will forward it on to them? Are you making the decision to shut off your phone and not respond to texts like that? But all of those women actually stopped what they were doing and started to just order the tests. So their decisions for how they use their next 30 minutes or even 20 minutes was completely changed based on societal expectations, external factors. Think about if a school calls you, your kid is sick. If the assumption is you're going to pick them up, your day is now changed. How you make your decisions have now been altered. So the way I look at the through line between fair play and unicorn spaces, where you asked me I started, is really this idea of the forward audit. I think it's important for leaders. So I'll say, Brooke, this is important for you. And Gail, Christy, all the leaders here. Who makes decisions? who makes your decisions? Who makes your company's decisions? Who makes your decisions is the forward audit I ask for us all to think about. That's the through line.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good example of the COVID test. It's so true. And I find great pleasure in the fact that I think I finally converted my children's school to understand to call Edgar instead of me. Because they know, they finally got it. Like, they were all included on all the messages, but they know that Edgar is likely going to respond faster than me. So they finally got it, and we're proud of that. But it just takes that he needs to answer and he needs to respond, because they won't get it if not. And so it really is shifting, just getting them behind it, getting them to do it. It's a whole thing.
That's why this is a cultural movement. I think Brooke, you and I have talked about that. That's why I love your work. Having, people be able to make different decisions about how they work is really important. New decisions for how they work that's not based on assumptions, that are based on choice. So that's why I think you and I have very similar values. But it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. And, the last thing I'll say about that before we go into like the fun part, because I'd love to play a creativity game with you today and see how we're all being inspired, because, I love my data, so I can get more data by having you help me play. But before we get into that, the last thing I'll just say that is related to decision-making. And my background, for those who don't know, I'm a lawyer. I'm trained as a lawyer, but all like my CLE and extra work has been in organizational management, especially family business and family foundations, which is pretty much like working with a small business, but with the added layer of family. So like the HBO show Succession, some of the businesses are not that small. And that lens of how do you sort of design an organization has also led me to understand that not only how do we make our decisions, but how we spend our time is really incredibly subversive. And so unicorn space, sort of segueing into that, was an understanding that in fair play, I had to have the realization that, oh my God, you know what? Seth has 4 hours after our kids go to bed to check PowerPoint, work out, finish a TV show, whereas I'm working in service of the home till my head hits the pillow 2 hours after he goes to bed. And understanding that time choice discrepancy, that Seth was having choice over how he used his day, and that creates agency and lightness. Whereas when we don't have choice for how we use our day, because it's falling all on us, it becomes a cycle of rage and resentment. So Unicorn Space became a book about honoring the data, because why would a creativity book come after fair play? It should be fair play for business, because nobody knows how to manage. Not you, Brooke, but at most high level.
We can write that soon.
White Christian men do not know how to manage. I'm speaking to you out there, but this had to come next, because the data was showing me that even if there was the potential for time choice, a lot of minoritized populations and women were saying to me, I wouldn't even know how to fill that time.
Yeah.
So that was not something that I wanted to hear. It was making me upset. It was very triggering. And that was how I started on the path to understanding how do we learn how to fill our time nutritiously.
Yes, for sure. And I was listening to your when Reese interviewed you the other day, and she had asked you, and I think that some of the research it talks about it in the book, but around the pandemic and how people are feeling. And there was 2 words, if you would share with us, it kept coming up. And I think this would have been a huge light bulb for me too. So share with us.
Yeah, it wasn't good. I will say, when I asked people how they felt about home life, when I looked at my word cloud, my data, my moleskins, the words that kept coming up, well, one word kept coming up all over, and that was drowning. But when I tried to or as my friend Leanna calls it, I'm a conveyor belt and my husband's a plate. When his plate is full, he's done. And I'm a conveyor belt, like just reacting. So I really like that analogy. But when I unpacked and said, okay, well, what do you mean by drowning? The next two words that came up in the word cloud were the deadliest combination I can think of: overwhelm and boredom. The mundane taking over, but so much mundane that you literally drown in it, right? So many school forms, so much watching of toddlers, so many trips to the dentist for orthodontics, so many communications with the teacher, just basically keeping your head above water. And I just don't want anybody to exist like that. I mean, obviously I can't uniquely solve it, but what I can do is at least put it on paper and say, this is the trends I'm seeing. And here's how a lot of people have gotten out of that. I can't tell you how to find the opposite of overwhelm and boredom, but I can say, as I said earlier, that I know that being interested in your own life is one way to get out of that. And so I can't tell you how to be interested in your own life, but again, I can tell you how other people have found it. And that's really what this book is about. It's a program, a practice to rediscover the talents, interests, curiosities that make you uniquely you.
Yes, which I want to play this game in a second.
Yes.
But I just wanted to share one thing, and then Gail has a question that I think will get us going and then kind of lead into that game. But and you'll probably think it's funny, when I read Unicorn Space, it was, we just bought a second house in the mountains, and I'm like, was determined I was going to really relax over the holidays. It was obviously a crazy year. We take 2 weeks off at the end of the year for Allaby and everybody to rest and rejuvenate. And so I knew I had the time off. And I'm like, okay, I'm reading through this. I was like, oh, I used to love to cook, and I haven't been cooking in 2 years really, besides like throwing stuff together or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, I really want to get back into cooking. Great. We now have this like 6 acres of land. We're going to have a garden. And then my very entrepreneur self was like, oh, and I could start a blog about this. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I realized that my curiosity, which is one of my best traits because I'm super curious about all things, and that's what helps me be a really great entrepreneur. But that curiosity had always had to turn into money or something that had a very tangible element to it, and that it couldn't just be me enjoying making some meals, that I had moved it into that realm. And so this book was so helpful for me to flip that completely and keep challenging myself throughout the book. I loved all of the interaction because I kept trying to pull myself back into a different way. And I love Unicorn Space, and it like have claimed my 30 minutes to an hour every day, which is like a game changer for me. But I wanted to try something new and try to go into a different way. So it's been something that was a little tough for me, even as a big proponent of Unicorn Space. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for saying that, because I think what you're reacting to is actually something that I was surprised by. I thought I was going to just have people say to me, well, I don't know what it is anymore. Right. That was the drowning. So, well, I'm drowning, so I don't know what it is anymore. But so let's go into, before we get to the game, we'll go into what is Unicorn Space. So it's not, I'll tell you what it's not first, and then we'll go, because I'm going to react to what Brooke just said. So what it's not is, it's not self-care. That's important. It's not friendships. That's important too. And that can be happening during your Unicorn Space. It's a third thing. It is active pursuits that make you come alive. And why it's not a hobby is because the number one word, that back to like overwhelm and boredom with the home, the number one word people were associating with hobby was infrequency, a nice to have. I pick up my guitar and strum it. I grab a chess game in Washington Square Park before COVID. That's great, but it's not what I'm talking about. Creativity linked to daily flourishing, that's what the science shows. That's what I'm talking about. Everyday creativity that links to daily flourishing. Now, how do you get there? Well, again, it's also why, the same way I hate the word passion, I also really despise the word hobby. I hate hobby, I hate passion, because it connotes that somehow we all have one that we can return to, and we are allowed to change. We're allowed to, I probably have a different passion every day. And I didn't think that was like allowable. But so understanding that, I think a curiosity is where the most creative people start, at least in my research and the books that I read, and I read a lot in 12 expert disciplines. But the other two pieces that Brooke is talking about are the connection with the world. So she said blog, 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 and then completion. So connection is a really beautiful one because it's that motivation for why you share with the world is actually my favorite C. But the two ones that are most triggering are the ones at the end. So I don't even know what a curiosity is anymore. My friend said the only thing I'm curious about is scrolling my friend's Venmo transactions. So that made me laugh. I said, I get it. And then, what Brooke is talking about are the women who've been told that their whole life they have to be excellent and productive. That is late stage capitalism speaking. That is not us. And so to me, while I'm not someone who, I don't rest in a traditional way. Like I'm not a meditator. I don't have an exercise practice necessarily, but my rest is the restorative practices of unicorn space. The dance that I've returned to, my advanced beginner jazz, the writing that I love to do. Now, the problem is if completion, so we have curiosity, connection, and completion. If completion starts, your excellent, productive self starts to believe completion has to be excellent, has to be monetized, has to become a side hustle. That was an equally hard problem that I was surprised by. I thought everyone was going to be triggered by the curiosity thing. I was so shocked by how many people are triggered by completion, because completion to them means excellence. It means monetization. And that is not the type of completion we're talking about. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. And so I want people to play with what a completion feels like to them. That isn't that. And so I'll just give you one story that makes me happy because it's this practice of those 3 C's is what unicorn space is, and when you see it. And so there was a woman that I love named Stephanie Hockersmith that I talk about in the book. And she's a mom in Colorado, and she suffers from celiac disease. And so one day she just got curious, that first C, and said, I wonder if I could make a pie for me and the people like me that tastes as good as a regular pie. So the way she was going to answer her experiment was she was going to sneak her gluten-free pie after she got curious about how to make it and experiment with flours into a pie baking contest. That was her completion. She did not expect to win. That's important. She just wanted to enter it, see if, she would get the same type of validation. If not, whatever. She knew her husband, her kids loved the pie. Her celiac friends, her completion was giving it to people in her community that had celiac. That was a completion. But she won. She won. Out of 50 pies, her pie wins. The gluten plus pie competition, her gluten-free pie wins. Nobody knew it was gluten-free. And then it sort of inspired her, not because she wanted to monetize it or, again, this has to be excellent now. It inspired her to continue on her journey, but in ways that continue to fulfill her. So I do want to say that that's what we're talking about here. It's a practice. So I talked to Natalie Kogan this morning. She wrote a book called Happier Now. And she said she was feeling excited about her book, but also a little sad. And I didn't want to interject in her conversation. But what I would have said to her is, I think it's because you're hanging out in completion. And so we got to get you back into curiosity again, or soon you'll be connecting with others. So you'll be in that C. But it's this cycle, the cyclical nature. Like, am I feeling curious today? Am I feeling like I want to connect with others today? Am I feeling like I want to complete something today? Mm-hmm. Those questions are way more open and exciting for people, according to my research, than saying I need to return to a lifelong passion that I never had in the first place.
Yeah, I love that example of the pie so much, because I think I found that in my journey with unicorn space too, because I think my first real go at unicorn space was the idea of Allobee. And I got curious about it, and then it turned it into a business. And I think in this last year, I had a completion of that. Not that we're completed, but we're doing very good, and it's a whole business and all of that. And so I needed another curiosity to spark back up.
Operating, I'll let you know, operating is not a curiosity phase.
Yeah.
Once you're in operations, I think it's really important for entrepreneurs to remember that those skills are very different. Operating a business is very different than the early curiosity about solving a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to remember that there are stages.
Yeah, for sure. And same thing with writing became my unicorn space. And now I'm pitching to get a book deal. And so it kind of started to get towards the completion. So now I'm like, okay. And that's where I think I got more curious for other stuff, but I love that cycle thinking. And I think women obviously operate in cycles very well. So being able to realize that it's a cycle and it can change and it can keep going, which that's what I think I love the most about what you talk. One of the things that you talk about in Unicorn Space is just, it doesn't have to be the same thing all the time. It can keep changing, and it should keep changing because it's a cycle and you need to stay curious. So I love that.
Well, and that's why it's a space. It's a mental and physical space that you can occupy. You can go there when you want to be paying attention to things outside of your roles.
For sure. I love it. Well, let's play this game.
Yay. Okay.
And then I do want to hit at our last bit. I do want to hit a little bit on the spiritual friendships.
Absolutely. And we're going to do that. Actually, we're going to hit on that right now.
Let's do it. I love it.
So this is fun. And I'm going to send this to you. Or did you get a box yet?
I don't think I got it.
Okay. So send it to me. I'm going to send you a unicorn box that will have this in it. Okay. So I'm just going to pick, because I see Christy right in front of me. Christy, will you be our uni, you'll play with us? This is like a game show.
I'm in.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So this is how it works. So this is a get inspired game. And so what it does is, if you're stuck in a conversation rut with your friends, if you are stuck in any rut of saying, how's the kids, how's work, this allows you to sometimes get beyond that, play with people, ask them what inspires them. So we're going to do that right now with Christy. So Gail and Brooke and Alex and Shelby, if you want to come off or not, you're Christy's spiritual friends. Okay. And what I mean by that is we now know there's great data around accountability partners. If someone keeps you accountable, 65% more likely you'll do something. If you have a success partner, someone you do it with, like, co-writer of a book, 95% more likely. So we're here to be your spiritual friends. And the way it's going to work, obviously it would be a lot easier if you had the cards, because I wouldn't have to read them to you. So you have to be patient with me. I'm going to read a lot of cards to you. And then you're going to listen to them, and then we're all going to listen. And what the goal is, Christy, whatever you're inspired by today, you're going to just pick the card that is most inspiring after listening. And then we're going to pick another card in the deck to remix with your card. Because some of the most curious people, what I started to see was they were remixing different ideas. So for example, my friend, we played this, she picked art as her card. And I had this idea for her that we were all sharing. My idea, she's an organizer. One idea was to pair florals with art, so that as an organizer, she can do a post around how to use florals if you don't have the money to organize your space. So I like that. Mine was, she's upset about the reproductive rights stuff happening in this country. I said, why don't you do a piece that describes the art around reproductive rights. We'll take it to one of the new axe throwing places that keep popping up. We'll put it up on the axe throwing board and we'll throw axes at it, and it's going to become rage art. So she picked my idea. So I'm now responsible for finding an axe throwing place. We're going to do it. So it's this idea of like, what can you do this week that sort of puts you out of your comfort zone? And so it should feel tangible. We're not telling Christy to go sign up for Mount Everest. So, okay. So I'm going to start reading to you.
Okay.
Card 1, building and DIY, restoration and renovation, cooking, baking, coding and engineering, video games, regular games like puzzles and cards, escape rooms, metallurgy, stitching and needles, woodworking, storytelling, event planning, language and anthropology, running, triathlon, snow sports, sports with balls, theater and production, circus, racing, spiritual wellness, genealogy and lineage, otherworldly pursuits, tarot, astrology, and magic, gardening and farming, health and wellness, finding, collecting, and foraging, fashion, or beauty?
Wow. I will go. I hesitate. I'm a filmmaker, and so I'm drawn to storytelling. So that one seems like a natural one. But gosh, should I pick something?
Let's go with that. Let's go with storytelling.
Okay.
That's what
All
you were
right, storytelling. Yeah.
Okay. So, so I'm going to ask our spiritual friends, does anybody else have a card that they want to combine with storytelling for something that Christy can do this week?
I'm going to say the DIY with storytelling because we know this about Christy. She's a phenomenal film, amazing expert, podcast expert, engineer with that. And sometimes I think other people wish they could be like that and be as cool of a storyteller. So I'm just going to say the DIY. That'll be mine. Anyone else?
Yes. Well, also, so what I also want to ask you, Christy, so I can, since I don't know you as well, what are some of the values behind storytelling that mean something to you?
Well, I believe everybody has a story, and it's my job as a storyteller to bring that out and make it entertaining, inspiring, or informational.
I love that. And why? Why do you think what values does that connect to for you?
Well, like our company's motto is I amplify quiet voices. And so specifically, I try to find the marginalized and the people that don't often get to share their voice. And I want to amplify that and get it out there so that there's more equality.
So I love it. So I'm hearing justice, fairness, equality, amplification. That's really, really beautiful. Okay. So does anybody else have a pairing? Because I have a good one now that I know I feel like I know your values. Gail?
I don't have a specific one, but I do feel like it should be something tangible, either art or building or something kind of visual.
Well, that's why I was going to pick photography. I thought it could be really fun, Christy, for you to tell a story through a picture this week. So maybe every single day, for just 7 days, I will challenge you to just take one picture, whether it's you want to commune with nature or you want to tell a story about whatever, a book on your shelf. I was just thinking as you were talking, like I would probably take a picture of this coaster, which is Venerio's. It's this really old bakery on 11th and 1st where I grew up, and I have a lot of memories of what it felt like to buy pastries from here. This was our luxury to take out because we couldn't afford taking out food. So I remember my mom would bring home these, like a couple of Italian pastries. It was such a big deal. So maybe I would take a picture of that coaster and do something with it. So I would say, I would ask you to do something with photography, and then the DIY thing to add on to Brooke's, maybe there's some sort of collage, some fun thing to do with like mixed media art and your photography combined with storytelling.
I mean, all those stories together, like how did
I love it. I love it. All right, Gail,
Cool.
we're going to do you next.
Okay.
The point is it's just, and I'll send you these prototypes, but it's just for you to start thinking about. But I will say, Christy, that remembering that, it sounds like, again, you have a really strong point of view for justice, fairness, equality, amplifying quiet voices. The cool part is that can come out in many different ways, not just through storytelling.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, let's go. Do you remember a card that stuck out to you, or should I read them again?
No, I do remember.
Okay.
I would pick gardening.
Oh, gardening. Okay, so tell us why.
Why? Nature is a big part of kind of what I get restoration from. And then I think seeing something, like nurturing it, grow, from a seed and having it grow. I just watched The Karate Kid with my boys recently. And you remember the scene where he's got the bonsai trees?
Yes.
and how much time and care he spends. So I've been doing a little bit after reading your book, some research on bonsai trees.
Oh my God, love it.
Because, you know, you can buy them and nurture them, but to like grow them from seed can take years, which is kind of a cool concept that it would be a long-term kind of unicorn project.
Oh, I love that. I love that idea. And having your children understand that beauty of the cycle of nature, that sometimes it takes a really long time to nurture something for it to grow, like you guys for 18 freaking years before you leave my house. You know? So what I'm hearing, so again, back to so what are the values? The two values that just popped out when you were speaking were the communing with nature as a restoration practice for you, and also the ability to nurture something. Are there other values that you have that gardening connects with?
I think beauty, just
Beauty,
you know,
yeah.
flowers and colors and yeah.
I see your flowers behind you.
Yes. Yeah. I love to walk in gardens and yeah, I think just I don't know. The idea of creating something that's, you know, symmetrical and has all the different colors and those kind of things. Our house is pretty new, so we have, you know, a blank slate still.
Oh, that's great. Do you have a place to garden?
We do several. So
That's
trying to
great.
figure out which one to prioritize.
Right. Well, I love that. Okay. Does anybody have a card to pair with gardening for an activity maybe that Gail could do?
I would say photography again. Sorry, I'm taking my camera off because
Please.
I'm
No, that's
multitasking.
great. I want to hear this. Yes, that I love it. So tell us why.
Because the beauty in nature that she's amplifying throughout all of like working with your hands. Visually, I would love to see it because I'm in Minnesota. So, you know, selfishly, I have my reasons, but it's just, it brings inspiration to others when you get to see what people get to cultivate and create in their own backyards with their hands. And there's just a beauty of working within nature.
Yeah, I was thinking even a picture of that floral range behind you would be really pretty to share. And I will say it could be a fun activity to share one thing you did that week as a group, you know, sort of an opening exercise for the team building. There was a nurse who reached out to me over Unicorn Space saying she decided to use photography to combat the industrial nature of the hospital. So she asked her whole team to take a picture of nature, one picture on the way into work and one picture on their lunch break, which forced people to get outside. Even in Minnesota, they're in Texas, but even in Minnesota, if you have to go outside, you're like, okay, I'll go take a picture of the snow, whatever. But sort of forced people to get out of the hospital, out of the industrial fluorescent lights. And then her team shares what they find on in their staff meeting. And then she also said one person was not into photography. So she said, well, I'll do nature, but I want to put it in one of those books, like the resin, like pick a dried flower and preserve it. By the way, it's not interesting to me. I want to Google, talk about curiosity. I want to be like, how do you preserve dried flowers? I'm sure I could go to Michael's and find something for that. That sounds fun. I used to love, my stepmother would do that. She'd make these collages with dried flowers. So I will give you an idea. So thank you for the photography example. I think that's beautiful. I will say, Gail, I would love to combine pottery with your love of gardening. And I thought it could be fun to take your boys or one of your families to some antique store. If you moved, maybe there's something new in your neighborhood, an antique store, a pottery store, buy one bud vase and then take some floral that you either forage or you find at a store and rotate the different types of flowers you put in that bud vase. It's my idea.
Thank you.
Brooke, do you have an idea?
Oh man, these have been such good ideas. I think, and this doesn't exactly fit into something specifically, but I'm going back to this bonsai, which I think is a really cool thing.
Yeah.
And it's starting to just document the bonsai, the journey of the bonsai, and how does that bonsai relate to like your own journey in life right now. And maybe have the, the kids kind of get involved with it too. How did they feel as they helped, get this planted or going, and just kind of getting them involved in the journey.
Oh my God, first of all, I love that. And because basically what Brooke just did was she just paired the writing card with gardening. And so could you get yourself a moleskin or a journal that has something of nature on the cover, and then do a haiku every week as you see difference in your tree, or something cool where you have non-threatening poetry. That's why I like haikus, because they're only like 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, and I'll make like 1 haiku a month or something really fun.
Also, kids can usually do the haikus too. It's like,
yeah, those are really fun. So I feel like but what's nice is like, I am not, I'm not a storyteller the same way Christy is, but I feel like I got some really interesting and important values, and I know you better, and same thing for Gail. And what's nice about this is psychological safety is not the vulnerability hangover of oversharing. It's not sharing anything, but I think this is an appropriate way to get to know people, to understand their deeply held values, to understand what restores them. And that's important. It's important during the pandemic and as a team. So thank you for being vulnerable with me and letting me share your inspiration journey. So I would just say, keep on doing, and share with us if you actually do these things, because we'd love to see you.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Well, yeah, we're going to definitely do this again, especially with the whole hive. So we'll make sure that we play this game, and it kind of, Alex is here, she's our community manager, but it gave me a really great idea for us to be able to get our hive buddies together, which are our accountability partner idea, for this to be kind of our icebreaker in the next few sessions that we're doing with
It'd be so cool. And then your hive buddy becomes a person saying to you, hey, did you ever get that bonsai tree? Or they can be the one looking up where you can buy a bonsai tree, or same thing, for Christy saying, what stories did you tell this week through your photography, or whatever. It could be really fun. But thank you, thank you for sharing with me. And like I said, this is a journey to understand how important it is that, we can make our decisions, we can be interested in our own life. And so the last thing I'll leave you with is, based on this exercise, if you can journal prompt or think of one day this week, just one, and this gets back to Brooke and what we were talking about with completion. One day this week, write down when you wake up, what is the most important thing I'm doing today? And make it outside of your roles as parents and or partners and or professionals and or caretakers of dogs, people, sandwich generation. One day this week, the most important thing you do that day should be outside of your roles.
I love it. And I know that you had, as my kids are about to come in on the Friday afternoon, but I know you have a word for the year, and maybe we can leave on that. What is your word for the year this year?
Yes, well, I have many different words, because clarity is always a word I tried for, but really this idea of flourishing, that languishing was the word of 2021. Adam Grant had coined that term, languishing. And so I like the ish. I think Reese had said her word was nourish. I like flourish. So figuring out ways in which, again, you can restore yourself, but really with the active, a restoration to me is also the active pursuit of flourishing, of what makes you come alive, as opposed to just what helps you rest. And so I wish that for all of you, of course.
I love it. Well, thank you as always for your wisdom and your
Hi.
I
was showing some really cool cards of things. You have your mommy's gonna have to ask you what things that you like to do. This is roller skating, this is biking, this is football.
Loves art, and we're going to
this is foraging. Maybe you can do some art in nature. That's event planning. Oh, do you know what this one is? What do you think that one is?
Mixing.
Yes, mixing.
Yeah.
So fun. She's like, what do you do in your career? That's weird.
She wrote the one about unicorns. Remember the unicorn book?
And I'll ask her if she can also color it for me, because a lot of people have been sharing on social media, their kids have been coloring this front page. So if you have time to color this weekend,
You can do
my
that.
daughter did this.
You can do all the ones in here. She has a little girl too. Oh, she'll do it.
Thank
and all
you.
of
And
the
send your
notebooks.
picture of you coloring.
Yeah. Okay, I'll send her to do that. But thank you so much, Eve. We're glad that we got to read this one. We'll read the next one at book club when you're ready for the next book.
Thank you. Thank
But
you for your
so
support.
much for your time today.
All right. Bye, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye.